In this part of the video, we are going to get hands-on on with SQL basics. All right, what do I mean by hands-on with SQL basics? I'll be talking about how to create a small database, how to import a CSV in the database, writing simple select queries with where, order by, limit, and group by, all these different things. And we will do a quick analytic checks as well later, data quality checks rather. So I've already explained to you in the last video and also sent you on Google Classroom an interactive display on how to install MySQL Workbench and MySQL Community Server. Remember, so let me just first of all, you need to open MySQL Workbench. You can just go in your search bar of your Windows and then you search for MySQL Workbench when this has already been installed, as I gave you instruction last time. Then you click on this small SQL connection here, and you will have access to MySQL Workbench as you are seeing. Next week, we will get into the details of what a relational database management is about. But for the time being, I just want to remind you something. There are two things that you have installed. There are two things that you have installed, which are the MySQL community server, and there is also the MySQL workbench that you are seeing right now. Okay, these are the two things that you have installed. Now, when you have installed these two things, what do they mean? This MySQL community server is the free MySQL engine that runs on your machine. That's what it is. It's where your data is stored. On the other hand, you also have what we call the MySQL Workbench. What is a MySQL Workbench? It is a graphical user interface client. We call that the GUI client if you want. The graphical user interface client is a window where normally you are going to type your SQL codes, command, and you will see the results as well appearing. Normally, you have to understand that it's a bit like you have the MySQL server if you want. It's a bit like your TV, and the way to interact with your TV is through the um, remote control. So the MySQL Workbench GUI, that is a MySQL Workbench, is basically that remote control that is going to give information to your TV on what channel you want to go and so on. So this is where you write your codes, and this is where your data is stored and so on. Okay. There are of course alternatives. Instead of working with MySQL Workbench, you have other alternatives as well. Okay, um, there are other possibilities that you have. You have dbeaver, for example, that you can use, but we are going to stick to this one here. You can investigate the different possibilities that you have if you want later on. So I'm using a free version here that you see of MySQL Workbench, which is free here. Now, so what do we want to do? As I told you, we are going to establish the connection when you are opening MySQL. Let me, you will remember, let me just close that for a moment. Just wait a minute. I search for MySQL Workbench and open it again. You would recall when you are opening MySQL Workbench, there is this part that you need to establish your connection with. And there, for the first time you are opening it, it will require a password, and it will be that password that I asked you to put last week in the previous video, which is ABC123. So you will need to use the ABC123, and then each time if you have to put the password, you put it, or otherwise you just remember it, save it. All right. Now, I am back in my MySQL workbench. There is here the navigator panel, as you will see. This is where I would be able to observe the information that are on my database through the schema, which also refers to database if you want. And then you have the query here, your script, where you write down all your commands. Okay, our output panel here. The output panel gives you an indication on whether your command has been successful or not. That's basically what it is. So let's start by the first step. We want to start by creating a database. You will see in in my navigator panel, I already have quite a number of database, four databases already there. But we are going to create a database. Let's suppose um, I'll create an example, a very basic example of a database, and let us call it create. To start to create a database, there are different ways that you can create a database, but you can use these icon here that you see here. For example, you click on that icon to be able to create a database, or you can write down a code. For example, I write down the code create, and then I said create database. I always need to write this down like that. And what is the database that I want to create? The database that I want to create is, for example, start, let me call it start 5129 week 3. Start 61 5129 week 3. And then I put the semicolon. Now listen to me. This capital letter is not necessary. You could write them down in small letters, lowercase everywhere, it would be fine. Normally, SQL is not as case sensitive, is not case sensitive like R is. R is case sensitive. If you type C capital instead of C small letter, it doesn't work. But here, having C capital everywhere, it doesn't matter anywhere. So everything is everything that you're going to write will come down to lowercase anyway. But I like to write the codes like that, so I will write it in this way. So create a database, and then let us call the database week 3, rather. So start 5129 week 3. Each time, every moment that you're going to create a database, you have to start by these two words: create database. And then you put the name of your database. And then when you have put the name of your database, you can execute that command. This is the first command that you are putting here. You can execute that command. How do you execute that command? You will see that there is a arrow here, which is like a lightning uh, icon. All right, so you can click on that icon here and it will execute it, as you will see here. And in the action panel you will clearly see that a one row affected, and it worked well. As long as it is green here, it means that it is working perfectly well. But the moment that it is red, it means that there is an issue. Now that you have created your database, you can refresh the navigator panel to be able to observe a database which has been created. You refresh and you will see that it is here appearing start 5129. Now that you have created your database, the next step is to be able to use that database. Each time I repeat, if you are working with a database, you will need to create the database number one. If you don't create it, it won't appear anywhere here. You create it, but if you create it, you always need to be able to use it. You see, there are many databases here, and you need to be there is a climate database, there is district database, there are so many. For my case, for you, maybe you won't have all these depending on what you have installed, but each time you're going to work, you will have more and more databases being included here. All right, but the fact that I've created a database called stat 5129 week 3, what I want to do now is to be able to use that database. How am I going to use that database? I will use that keyword use, and then I put the name of the database. Ensure that you write it correctly, even if it is capital letter, small letter, doesn't matter. As I said, it works perfectly fine. Just bear in mind that when you have finished a line of code in SQL, you always need to put that semicolon. That's something that is very important. Okay, you put the semicolon. So let's use that database. You will see that whenever I run that code here, run means you execute that through that small symbol of lightning here. When you run that, you will see that this will become bold. All right, it means that in other word, my database is being used now. So in other word, when it is bold, it means that I'm working with that particular database in my system here. So that's the first step that we have gone through. What I just did here is that I created a database, and you will see I created a schema. If you want a database, I created a schema or a database. Okay, it's the same thing. And we will note something. Whenever I put hashtag, it means that it is a comment that I am doing. When I say it is a comment that I'm doing, it means that if I run that, it will not bring in any code or anything. It won't give you any result down there in the action output as you see. Okay, each time you click on that, it won't do anything because it's just a comment. It means that it is not part of your coding, but it is here just to give you an idea of what the codes below mean. This is a single line comment, but you also have multi-line comment as well. For example, a multi-line comment, let me just give you an example, is something like that. If you want to write multiple line comments, you can enclose them in with a forward slash asterisk, and you close it with a asterisk forward slash. And here, for example, what you may want to do is to write, okay, things like that, st1 start 5129 rather, and then you put lecture 3, and we are doing SQL basics here in this class. We are doing SQL basics, and then on the next line you can say what we will do. Number one, create a sandbox or create a database, a DB, and a table. These are the one of the things that I want to do. The second thing that I want to do in this class, not only to create a database and a DB, but I also want to import a small CSV file as I've uploaded on your Google Classroom. Say import a small CSV file that is called cafeteria sales CSV. I want also, what I'm going to teach today, we will also learn select statement, where, order by, order by, limit, and also group by. These are the different things that we are going to do today: learn, order by, group by, and so on. And then we will also run. Well, let's stop here. You can carry on like that. You will see that these are different things that we can do, and then you will see you can put them in between multi-line comments. Multi-line comments mean you will need to write down slash forward slash asterisk, and you close it with asterisk forward slash. Then you can write whatever you want in between. That will not be treated as a code, but it will be treated as a command. And then you see if you execute that, it doesn't give you anything, it's just a command. That's one thing that I wanted to share with you for the time being. The next thing that I'm doing here, this is the first part. I'm creating a database. Let's call it part 0. Now, the second part that I want to do is the first part, rather, is I want to define that table. When I've created a database, this database is empty. There is no tables there. So I want to to create that table. How do I create the table? So first of all, let me say I want to define the table. So what do I want to do in that table? I want to write down to create a table by writing down create table, and I put the name of the table that I want. For example, I want the name of the table to be called cafeteria sales. Cafeteria sales. That's going to be the name of the table as you are seeing. All right. And when I'm creating a table, there is one thing that is important, is that I include the information that I want in the table. When I say I include the information that I want in the table, it means I include the fields. What are the fields that I want to create in the table? By the way, I can put this down there. Okay, what are the different fields that I want in the table? Fields means what are the different columns that I want? What are the different columns that exist that I want? For example, I may want to include a sale ID. You will see that in the data set that I've sent you. You will have a sales ID, you will have a sale date, you will have campus as an information, you will have item as another information, you will have a quantity as another information, you have unit price as another information, you have pay method as another information. These are the different columns that you have in your table. I'm explaining it to you with regards to only one table for the time being, but bearing in mind that, for example, next week we are not going to work with only one table. This is just to get you hands on SQL, all right? But next week we are going to work with different tables. So you will see here you have sales ID, you have sales date as it is here, campus, same name, item, quantity, and then I put unit price and pay method. These are the different columns that I have in my data. So when this is done, I'm not yet over. I need to be able to state what type of the data these different columns are. So what type of data am I dealing with in these different columns? Let me just open that here. So you will see, for example, an ID is one thing. You will see that there is the sales date. You have a date, which is a data type, which is date. You will see that there are text here and so on. And you will see that there are integers. You will see that there are unit prices as well, unit prices. You will see that there are even some kind of categorical sort of data and so on, where you have two possibilities: either it is um, cash or card. All these are the different things that you have. So what can you do? I'll close that, and then I explain to you what are the different things that I can do. For example, for the sales ID, I need to define what it is. Normally, for the case of a sales ID, it is an integer, as you would note. If you don't see it on the screen right now, you can open it at home. I've already sent it to you. You can open it or you can rewind and go through it. I'm not going to go through each time. So you have the integer. Sales ID is an integer. And then you have sale date. This is what we call a date variable. You have campus. Campus is a text, as you would have recalled earlier, and it is not a lengthy name, campus. So what we'll do, we will put voucher to represent that data type. I'm going to mention a few things about that. Don't worry in a moment, but let me just go back anyway. So you have date, you have text, which I'm referring to as bar chart. You have an integer here. You have unit price, but I can also change that unit price even if it is integer. I can consider it as a decimal if I want. This is another thing that I can do. And then you have the enum there that I'm going to explain in a moment. So let me just put voucher. I'm not going to get into the details of all these data types. I'm going to briefly get into that, but I would expect that you go and investigate each of these that what I'm writing right now on your own. So you have the integer, you have unit price, which is decimal. Bear in mind that my data is not decimal, but I am still allowing the possibility of having decimal in the data. And then I have something else that we call enum. And in the enum, I've got two things that can be included. There's one cash, cash, and there is one card. In this exercise, you will see that I'm using certain data types that normally are only part of so many data types that exist. Let's start by this one, I think it's relatively easy to understand that this is an integer, as you would have noted here. All right. Then you have date. This is also relatively easy to understand that there is data type in SQL called date, that you can include dates, and you will see that this is a possibility. Then you have um, another data type that we call voucher. What is voucher? There are other data types in SQL, as I explained to you earlier. There is text, there is blob. All these are ways of dealing with text, but there is one which is voucher, and voucher is useful in the sense that it includes the possibility of determining how many elements you want the text to include. For example, if my text will not take more than 20 characters, I can put 20 there. If my text is relatively lengthy, I will put more information like 40, you see. But what is the advantage is that with voucher, normally when you are putting, for example, 20, let's suppose the campus is called réduit. Réduit. It won't store one, two, three, four, five, six. It won't. How many letters you have? One, two, three, four, five, six. Sorry, six. You have six words, six letters here. Sorry, not word, but six letters. It means that it won't take space for 14 additional space. It won't save that in memory. So it won't take more bytes to save such thing. That's one other thing. But I'm not going to get into all these details as I'm mentioning. By the way, you are expected to do some independent learning one way or the other, okay? Please go and investigate what voucher is. I've just mentioned it here. Go and investigate what voucher is. Go and investigate what decimal is. Though I'm explaining it to you, but if you want to know more data types, you will need to go and investigate what are the different data types that exist in SQL that you can use. All right. I'm just mentioning a few there. Integer is okay. And then decimal, I think it's quite clear. You are talking about 8 figures before the decimal and 2 figures after the decimal. So basically, this is kind of allowing for any digits that you want, as long as it doesn't go more than 8 digits on the left, and you don't have more than 2 decimal places. So that's what I'm setting. So if you have more than 2 decimal places, it will not be considered here. And then you have enum. Enum is what? It's like a data type that allows a column to store a value chosen from a predefined list of permitted values. That's what it is. So you have already permitted values like cash and card that you allow, and you do not allow anything else to be included and input. If in my Excel there is something else, like for example, credit, or what, credit something, or credit card, if I have something like that, it won't be included in the data. Okay, so that's what I mean by forcing the you like forcing these two possibilities only in there. That's what we call an enum. The advantage of enum is that it enforces data integrity, all right, by basically restricting your column values to a specific set. That's what it does. It prevents invalid or inconsistent data entry. Now, when you are done with that, you're not over. Each time when you have put the sales date and so on, you need to put a comma. Otherwise, you will see that it will put a cross here, because it means that there is something missing in your code. Each time you need to do that, you need to put a comma at the end. All right? You put a comma at the end, except for the last. The last, you don't put a comma. The last one is not a comma. You don't even put a full stop as well, but you don't put a comma. The other thing I want to do is to mention something that we call a primary key. Not only the sales ID is integer, but the sales ID is more than being an integer, but it is also a primary key. A primary key is a unique identifier of that particular data. It's a unique identifier of that particular data. Let me just open the file again. I've closed that. Just give me a second with you. You will see that when you open that file, there are many information, there are many columns. But this column means that this one uniquely identifies the first row. These two uniquely identify that second row. What does it mean? For example, if I cannot say that sales date is something that is a primary key. Why? Because you see that there are twice uh, day one of month 8 of 2025 that is included here. There are three times. So I cannot say that this sale date uniquely identify each row. No, sales dates do not uniquely identify each row. Even campus, for example, I can't use because you can have Reggie repeated in two rows. So how can Reggie identify the first row? No way. The only thing that identify the first row on its own, not the first row, but the only thing that uniquely identifies each of these rows of data is the sales ID. You have one, two, three, and it goes on. If you add one, two, two, for example, that would not be able to be considered as a primary key because it does not uniquely identify that these two rows. All right. So then when you have something like that, you can when you have an identifier, you can consider it as what we call a primary key. Next week I'll talk about something else that we call a foreign key. So the primary key is a unique identifier of a particular table. Generally, as far as possible, every table should have a unique identifier. Of course, when you have done this part of creating a table, you need to put your semicolon as usual. When this is done, you will see that right now table is empty. So let's run that part here. Let's run that part and execute it. And you refresh again. You will see that now table contains a drop down where you have the table cafeteria sales that you have created as you are seeing here. And this cafeteria sales that you have created contains information, for example, the columns that you have created, sales ID. If you click on sales ID, you will see that sales ID is an integer with a primary key. Sales date is date as a keyword that identify a date. And campus is a text defined by varchar. All right. These are the different things that has been done. But right now, there is no information in that table. For example, if I click on this small icon right, if I over my mouse, sorry, if I over my mouse over the cafeteria sales, you will see that there is here a small sort of table form of icon. If you click on that, you will see that this is empty. The table is empty because there is no information. So what's our next step? When we have created the table, our next step is to import the data, is to import the CSV file that we have. How do you import the CSV now? To be able to import the CSV, generally there is a way of writing down the data, all right, of writing down your data and putting it manually, all right. But there is something that we call insert into, and then you will say insert into whatever variable that you want to insert into, and then you will put the values. Generally, if you have to do it manually, that's how you will do. You will put each of these values again and again and again until you finish, and you put the comma. That's the kind of way that you would input things manually. But given that I have the data already saved and you will have it already on Google Classroom, you are kindly requested to download the data. Let me just show you there. You are requested to download the data here that we call SQL cafeteria sales. You download that data and save it somewhere on your in your documents. Once you saved it in your document, how do you load it in SQL? You will load it using the table wizard. What do I mean by that? I will come here on cafeteria sales and I will right click. All right. I will right click, and when I've right clicked here, you will see that there is table data. I repeat, I come to the table that I want to import the data. It depends if you have another table, several tables that you have created, and ensure that you select the correct one. So I select the cafeteria sales. I say data import wizard. When I click on data import wizard, I will be given that file path and I need to locate my CSV file. If your data is in Excel format .xls, you need to save your file as CSV. By the way, if you don't know how to save a file as CSV, if you are getting trouble with regards to the practical aspect, next week we are meeting anyway. And next week, when we are meeting, we are going to sort this out if ever you have any problem with these things. Okay. If you don't know how to save a file as CSV or any issue that you might have on that, I will discuss it with you. So we will click on file path and we click on browse, and then you locate the file where it is. For example, my file is in a folder somewhere and it is called cafeteria sales.csv. So I just double click on it and I click next. When I'm clicking next, now I will have the option of using an existing table or to create a new table. If you did not write this down, the whole thing here that you are seeing, then you will need to create your own table. You will need to create a new table rather. And then what would happen is that SQL will try to determine what the variables are on its own. But don't expect SQL to give you voucher, for example. It will give you maybe text, it will give you something else. So, but the advantage of writing down your create table is that you are in control. For example, the enum, you are in control of what's going on. So that's one of the advantage. So you use the existing table and then you click next. And then when you click your listing table, you just ensure that the source column and the destination column matches. For example, if sales ID matches with sales ID, sales date is sales date. You don't have sales ID for sales date or things like that. Just do a quick check to ensure that everything is fine. It seems that the column from my CSV is the same as the column that I have written here, because it may happen that in the CSV it is called pay method, but for me I may write it like this without the underscore. So this is what I'm saying. If you are writing down something from the CSV file, it needs to match what you have here, and then you can then click next. And then when you click next, you click next again to import the file. And then if there is any mistake, you need to check what the mistake is about. Normally, to know the mistake, you can go through that log if you want, but you also can just check in the output panel down there. You will see that it says quantity specified twice. The problem is that if I go back, I might have, you see here, I've selected quantity twice. What happened here is that probably when I was walking around, I just scroll without knowing. You see, if you have to be careful when you scroll with your mouse, there are some issues that happen sometimes. You need to ensure that if you are scrolling with your mouse, be careful not to um, do to run the scroll over these filters here. Ensure that they match exactly as they are. For example, you see when I'm scrolling, I'm doing some mistake here. Again, sales ID, this should be campus. Let me put it back. This should be item, and if I scroll, I move to the right and scroll, but don't scroll on these. Okay, and then I put quantity again, unit price, and then I pay method. So if you did not do that mistake, you would not have any issue. If you have been scrolling around, then of course these would be wrong. You will get an error message. So now it should work perfectly well without any issue. So let's carry on and see what's going on. You will see that the data has been imported. It says import data file finished performing task. Everything seems fine. We move on. It says 20 records have been imported. You also need to have an idea of whether there are 20 records, and indeed there are 20 records in my data and they have been imported successfully. If you got 19 records which have been imported, it would mean that there is one data which has not been imported correctly. Maybe because the enum, for example, there is something written differently. It's not written as cash, it's not written as card or whatever. So then you click finish. And when you click finish, you refresh again. You will not see the data yet unless I click on that small icon as I just mentioned to you, this small icon which looks like a table next to cafeteria sales. And then now I get my data as you are observing here displayed right in front of me. Okay, this is my data displayed right in front of me. I can close that small editor here and then go back in this import.csv. So I've explained to you how to import your CSV file. That was relatively easy. Don't forget how to import your CSV file. This is important. Let's move on to the third part. I've already showed you how to have a first look at the data by clicking on that icon. But instead of clicking on the icon here, you could also write what we call a select statement. The select statement is the select clause is one of the it's not one of the most, but it's the most important query that you need to know in SQL. That select statement, what it does, it enables you to query your data to be able to view your table. Whatever table you want to write, to see what are the columns of a particular table that you want to see, you will do that through the select statement. Many of those different things you will do through the select statement. So we select star from, I will explain to you what the star from means. Then I need to select something from the table. What table? I want to select cafeteria. So I double click on cafeteria sales. It gives me the cafeteria sales here without me having to write it. And then I can obtain all this star here. By the way, I need to remove that because it's a code that I'm running, by the way. Here it's basic. Let's have call it first look. Okay, it's a first look that I'm having at my data. So when you say select star from cafeteria sales, it means that the star represent all means what? All columns, not all rows, but all columns. When you say select star, it means that I'm selecting all the columns. What are the all the columns? Sales ID, sales date, campus, item, quantity, and so on. That's what I mean by star. When you put star, it means that you're selecting all the columns of the table cafeteria sales. Don't forget your semicolon. Then you can select that. You will see you will get the same thing that if you were to click on cafeteria and click on the icon here. You remember? Sorry. Let's close that. So if you click on the icon here, you remember you get the result, but you will get the same thing by writing this code here. And here we go, you get the same thing. Now if you want, for example, only the first 5 rows instead of having all the different rows, you can just add another information here which is called limit. And limit, you say if you want the first 5 rows, you say limit 5, and then you execute that, and then you will see that you get only the first 5 rows as you are observing here. First 5 rows. So if you want to see it properly, please just run it as well uh, on your computer as well. Okay. These are the kind of thing that we want to do in the third part of this lecture. Then I want also now to select a few columns. All right. I want to select only a few columns and also include where filter. That's what I want to do, and also do the order by. 3 things I want to show you now. What do I mean by all this? Number one, let's suppose I want only sales date. Okay, I want only sales date. This I want only campus, item, and quantity. These 4 columns only. I'm not interested in the unit price. I'm not interested in, let's suppose, the pay method. I'm interested in only these 4 columns of data. And not only am I interested in only these 4 columns of data, but I'm interested in these 4 columns not for eben, but only for reduit. So in other words, I will have 1, 2, 3 rows. These 4 columns and these 3 rows for reduit. And not only am I interested in these four columns for reduit, but also for quantity being more than or equal to 2. All right, being more than or equal to 2. It means being more than equal to 2, the second row will not be there. So how can I get only these different information? Let's start. You will start by writing select again, select, which is a very important statement, and you put the name of the column that you want. What are the different names? I have, first of all, not sales ID, but sales date. Okay, I have sales date. I put comma, and then I put the second column, which is campus. I'll double click on it. If you want, you can write it down, but just to avoid wasting time, you can double click there. You put item, and you want to put quantity. These are the different columns that I want in my data. All right, I want these different columns in my data. So I just put them as it is. I don't put star now. When would I put star? If I want all the columns, including the sales ID, unit price, and pay method. But here, I'm interested only in some of these. So that's why I put it like this. Okay. Now, having done that part, the second thing that I'm going to do, I will say from what table. You can write it all at one go on the right, or you may wish to, for reading purposes, write it down below. From what column? From what table? I say from cafeteria sales table. But if I just do that, you will see that you will get only without the semicolon, because there is nothing that coming afterward. If you want, you can put the semicolon here, it's okay. So you will see, you will get all the data that you have for reduit, eben, and all these different things, coffee, quantity one, and so on. But I'm interested in only what? I'm interested in only where the campus is reduit. All right. So that where the campus is reduit and where the quantity both is more than or equal to 2 for whatever item. So what do I do? I come down there and I will filter. We call that filtering. Now I say campus, where campus is equal to, and then you put the name of the campus. For example, the name of a campus is Reduit. You are just going to copy Reduit here. Just be careful and show that when you are copying Reduit, you copy the row just to ensure that there is no additional space or whatever. If there's an additional space down there, you need to be careful just not to forget to put an additional space here. All right. But in my case, it's working properly without the additional space or anything. With me, I added it, so I remove it. So it was working well. So I just put Reduit as Reduit here. You can put it in single quote, you can put it in double quote, doesn't matter. For your information, each time you're working with the text, you need to always enclose it between these double quote or single quote. All right, always do that. And then you are not filtering only by campus is equal to reduit, but by campus reduit and the quantity being greater than or equal to 2. So then you say and then you put the name of a column quantity, and then you say quantity is greater than or equal to 2. That's how you write greater than or equal to 2. That's part of it done. And then if you wish, you can run that. You will see I'm not putting the semicolon. I can put the semicolon, it's okay. But if I don't put it, it will still run normally. Why? Because there is no additional code after this. So the semicolon is important. Nevertheless, as far as possible, try to keep it. If in case you need to move to something else, a new line of code, then you should automatically use a semicolon. But here, whether I use it or not doesn't matter much anyway, because I have nothing after that for the time being. So let me just select that data here and run it, and you will see that you will get all the relevant details. Only 3 rows have been selected. Now I may wish, because I let's suppose these dates were not these data was not ordered by date, but let's suppose they were ordered by quantity. If this data was ordered by quantity, you can just come here and click on date and it will order it. Okay, you will see that there. You click on the column, it orders it. But let's suppose the data is not ordered by uh, quantity. I mean, if the data is ordered in quantity but not by date, and you want to order it by date, you can, instead of coming and clicking on that sales date here, you may say by order by, and then you put the name of sales date and you put your semicolon, because now it's going to be over. I'm not going to go further than that for that part. So when you order by sales date, you will see that it will order automatically. It's the same as if I click here. You see, just note where I'm pointing here, please. So I'm pointing back to my quantity, which is data ordered in quantity. And now I order it by sales date. You see, sales date is not ordered. You have second of eight month. This, then you have the first of 8 months. Then you have the sixth of the eighth month. It's not correct. So what do? I order them by sales date, for example, instead of clicking here, and you will see that it will order it automatically for you itself. That's one way of ordering data, of filtering data, and selecting only a few columns from the data. That's the fourth part of the fifth part, rather, because the first was to create the database. Now, let's suppose I want to create, for example, another column, which is the revenue by each of these different dates and IDs. All right. If I want to create a revenue by each of these dates and IDs, so basically I can just copy that again, sales date. I come down there. So let me just give it a name first. I want, what I'm interested in is to obtain the revenue. So if I want to do that, I'm deriving, let's talk about the fifth part here, which is basically the sixth part rather. So the derive a column, I want to derive column. Like here, I want to derive revenue. And of course, I want it to be sorted. So if I want it to be sorted here, derive column, what I want here is a column revenue, and I want it to be sorted. Okay. So by the way, when you are done with that, don't forget to click on your small disk icon here. When you click on the small disk icon, you are going to save your data as a SQL file, just for information, and it will be saved somewhere on your path, on your folder. So you want these different columns. I want sales data. I want, maybe what I will do it, I will change the order. Let me remove the campus. I want sales date, sales ID, sales ID rather. I change a little bit here. I want the sales ID. I want, um, let me just not put the date. Let me change a little bit rather. Sales ID. I want the item, as you are seeing, and then I want the quantity. I want the sales ID, I want the item, and I want the quantity. The sales ID, the item, the quantity. And I also want the unit price, as you are seeing here. And not only do I want the unit price, now I want the revenue. But the revenue is not given here. The revenue is going to be equal to the quantity times the unit price. But it is not available. So what do? I can create it right from the select statement itself. How do I create it? I will take quantity, just come here, I'll take quantity, and then I multiply by the unit price. When I take quantity, I multiply by unit price, I get my revenue. But the only issue that I have with that is that when you are going to obtain your table, it will appear as quantity times unit price. It's not very nice. So you can just give it a name. And one way of giving it a name is by using this term as, the keyword as, and you put an alias to that particular column. You put an alias to that column. Let's suppose I call it revenue. I put an alias to that column revenue, to that column. Then it won't appear. So let's suppose I remove that for the time being so that you can see the difference. I do enter and I say again from cafeteria, this time from cafeteria sales. And then I did not say I'm interested in relevant campus or anything this time, but I want to order by revenue. The date where there is revenue. Ah, yes. So I order by revenue, but I can't order by revenue. I need to write this down here for the time being. Order by this. And when you are ordering, you need to tell what kind of ordering. You want descending order, you want ascending order. Generally, you want the highest revenue to be on the top and lowest revenue to be below. So in other words, you want it to be descending. And to tell SQL that you want your table to be sorted by revenue in highest to lowest, you need to say this DSC, which means descending order. All right. So then you can put your comma here, your semicolon, sorry, and then you just run that query, and you will see that you get your quantity times unit price as you are seeing here. Uh, so I don't know if you are able to see it well, but you will see that the data has been sorted out in terms of quantity times unit price, highest first, and it goes down. So you will see that there are biryani, sandwich, and so on being sold. These are the uh, different sales ticket that we had, and the highest was 240,000, 240, sorry, thousand, 240 rupees of revenue or whatever. But as I told you, this is not very nice in terms of column heading. So if you want, you can give it a name. You say as revenue. And if you say as revenue, you can also, instead of writing down this, you can keep it as it is. It will still work, but you can also just put revenue here as well. It will work automatically. You can. This is what we refer to as an alias um, in SQL. This is what we refer to as an alias, as revenue. When you're doing that, you are giving a name to that column. So we can run this again. It will work perfectly well, but the only difference is that it will not be called QTY times unit price, but it will be called revenue as you are seeing here. It works well. And then if you want to obtain only the first five top sales that you add, so you can just put limit again, five. And limit five gives you the first top five sales. You click here and you get only the first top five sales here. These are the kinds of things that you can do. The sixth part now, the sixth thing, the next thing I want to do is to explain to you aggregation. That is total revenue by campus. I want to explain to you how to run total revenue by campus. How do we go about that? Um, First of all, we will need to go through the select statement again. You will see that in SQL, everything will go through that select statement. All right. Everything that you want to display will always come through that select statement. That select statement basically uh, is telling us what column you want in your data. For example, let's suppose I want the column campus and I want the revenue because why? I want the total revenue by campus. So if I want the total revenue by campus, I will need to write down the total revenue by campus. Now listen to me. When I say total revenue by campus, I can't take the quantity by unit price only. Okay. Why I can't take the quantity by unit price only? Because the quantity by unit price only will involve all the different sales ID that you would recall that we have here for each campus. You will have the total revenue for each campus. It won't be helpful. We want the revenue by campus, that is all the Regui added together, all the eben added together, and so on and so on. So to be able to do that, we need to do the sum of these quantity that we have by unit price, and we'll give it a name. We'll say as, maybe we can say total revenue if you wish, total revenue. All right, that's what we can do. And then the other thing that you will note in when you are giving a name to something like a column name, don't please don't put a space there. You always either you put underscore if you wish, or there is another thing that we call a backtick that you can use, but I'm not going to discuss that now. So you can just, if you wish, just put underscore just to differentiate two things. And then you say from what table you want that. Obviously, it's going to be from the cafeteria sales table that you will get these two information. Only the sum is a function that will add all these revenues. But always, when you are doing a sum in when you are doing a sum in SQL, remember that on one side you will have a different campus. You will have réduit, and then you will have a band, all right, to campus. Then you will have on the right the total revenue, which will be whatever it would be. Let's suppose it is 1,000 rupees, and a band it is, let's suppose, 500 rupees, things like that. So this is the kind of result that I want to get in the end. But when I'm going to get such type of result, it means that my table will contain only these two rows that contains these two campuses, and it will contain number one on the left, the name campus, obviously, and on the right, it will contain the total revenue for each campus, which is obtained by the sum. Now, if you are doing that, you will need to group your rows by campus. Because remember, originally, when you come here, you will see that there are different registries, one, two, three, four, and so on and so on and so on. But you don't want all these four different registries. You want to have only one row that contains all the registry, only a second row that contains all the event, for example. That means that you will need to group your data by campus. This is why you will use this term group by. Group by, and then you put how you want to group them. It is by campus. Note something, always when you are doing an aggregate, whether you are doing sum, whether you are doing mean, or things like that, you will need to always use this group by keyword in SQL. You will always need to use this group by. So you just say you want the sum, but it is by campus. So you use the group by campus, and then you will say, let's suppose I end that here and I run that, you will see that I've got the total revenue for Redri and the total revenue for Eben. That's very important, because if I do not do group by, that thing will not work at all. All right, we won't get it won't allow me to the result will not, you won't have any result basically, sorry. So if you want some result when you are using a sum and aggregate, that's what we refer to as, you always need to use this group by. Now the other thing that I can do, an additional clause that I may add to this, is to order the revenue by descending. That is, the highest total revenue will go first and the lowest revenue will go lower. And we just did that earlier, order by. We use the same principle, obviously, and we bring it down there. So we just, if you wish, you can just copy that, of course, and then we will just change that revenue to total revenue that we have written here. So here we go. And then now Eben will appear first and Redri will appear second, as you will see down there. Eben first and Redri appear second. So we got what we were expecting before. One column you get the campus, and one column you get the total revenue. So what's the next step? We will now do some data quality quick checks. Okay, very quick data quality checks, all right, on the data. There are different types of data quality check that you can do, but we will focus mainly on one. There is, for example, the missing values that you can check, the sum of missing values for each of these column if there is any, but we are not going to check that because normally this is a small data and there are basically non-missing values here. But So for one of the things that you can also do, though, let me just give you an example, is to check how many valid categories you have for different of these categorical variable if you want. Okay, what are the different categorical variables that you have? For example, you have a campus itself. All right, we know that there are two campus. Okay, but you may wish to check if there is no duplicate IBAN or there is not one which is wrongly written. For example, there is one with IBAN like this. There's another one written like that. For example, wrongly written. You can just check that quickly. Let me just show you. For example, you do select and then you say distinct. When you do select distinct, it means that it will give you only the distinct campus that you have, only the unique campus. So if you have two campuses that are Eben and Redui, it will give you only these two. If there are three, it will give you three. So you are going to do it from cafeteria sales. I run this here and you will, excuse me, I run this here and you will see it gives me only two. If there were three, like suppose some of them written a bit similarly but wrongly, then you would have had to go and identify where the mistake is and amend accordingly. You can do the same things like distinct campus. Let's check this out. For example, not campus, but let's have a look at something else here. You have, for example, pay method. Obviously, pay method, there should be no problem as such because you have only two possible possibilities, cash and card, and you've already enforced that right from the start, which means that when you were loading the data itself, if this was not satisfied, it would mean that there would have been a problem. It would have said there is an error or anything. But still, just if you want to confirm, you can do it there and you will see that it's no problem. Yeah. As you see, cash and card only. We can do that for also the items that we have to see if the items are right, are well written or not, or if there are duplicate information pertaining to these different items. Okay, you can do that and you select. So select distinct will just give you distinct things. For example, here you have coffee, tea, sandwich, samosa, juice, and biryani. So if biryani is wrongly written, then you would have probably two different biryanis wrongly written. Okay, so then you would have to correct for the mistake. That's some kind of quality checks that you can do. You can also do the sum of missing of null, but I'm not going to get into that here. The other thing that you can do is, for example, um, there are some practical things that you can do. Okay, so let's find out some practical patterns that we can get. A few practical patterns in this data that we can extract from this data. For example, given that suppose you are the owner of a cafeteria and you want to do an analysis of your revenue, of your daily revenue, for example, then you can do something like, okay, we start by select as usual, and then we are going to select the sales date because this is going to be in one column. You have a sales date, and in the other column again you will have the same thing like before, the sum of quantity times unit price, but this time it is not going to be as total revenue, but it is going to be as daily revenue because you are doing this sum by sales date. So we can call it daily revenue. Daily revenue. We can call it daily. We can call it daily revenue. And then you can get it from, of course, what table. It's got, you got it from the cafeteria table, excuse me. uh, from the cafeteria table. That's what you get, and you would recall that, as I just mentioned to you, each time you are using a sum, there is always a group by that comes in. Now, this group by is based on what? It means what would be the rows in my data. The rows in my data will be by sales date because this time I don't want to group by campus, but I want to group by date. That is, every date that is similar or not would have a particular daily revenue. Let me just check. Sorry, let me just check this data again and show you what I mean. So for example, here you have 0108 2025. You repeat 0108 2025 and you repeat 0108 2025. So if you are going to do a daily revenue for the owner of this uh, cafeteria for these two campuses, it would be like these three first one would be grouped together according to their date, then the next two one would be grouped together according to their dates, and so on, irrespective of where they are, whether a GA or a Ben. So you will say group by sale date. You will see that this is important here. You will group by sale date. And of course, if you are grouping, you would like to know which date have had the highest revenue. And for that, you can do an order by as you did earlier. You will do the order by and you put the daily revenue this time as the order by. So I think it's relatively easy to understand based on the wording that you have. Now, for the first time, when you are seeing all these different terms, select, from, group by, order by, and all these things, obviously it might look a bit difficult for you for the first time, for those who have never seen SQL in their life before. But the wordings in themselves are not complicated. You just need to take some time and assimilate and assess what is written there and try to understand what I've done. And when you understood what is being done, what is this select about, what is this from, what is the group by, what is the order by, what is this where that we have used earlier, if you have been able to assimilate that, then you can basically do any exercises later on SQL. So it's essential at least that you understand what the select is. The select is basically just producing your table, whatever column you want. And then you are going to say from what table. It's always like that. Select, you put whatever you want as column, and then you are going to say from whatever table. And then if you stop here, it's okay, you can stop here, but you can also go ahead. Like here, you can't stop here because there is a sum. If there is no sum, you can stop here, you finish. But when there is a sum, you always need to do the group by. These are the certain principles that you need to always remember. So what I will do now is to run this whole thing, and you will see that now the date that I had highest, that we had the day highest daily revenue was on 708 2025. That's the kind of thing that you do. The other thing that you can also do is to check, let's suppose here I wanted total revenue by total revenue per day. But now let's suppose I'm interested in card versus cash revenue share. Okay, cash revenue. Let's make it like that. Okay, so how are we going to get that? We can say I'm interested in two things, two column. One column that would be about the pay method. That's one column. The other column is again, I will need to do a sum based on card and a sum based on cash, obviously. So again, the same thing applies here. You will see that this comes again here in this particular context. It's a sum of unit times quantity. But I'm not going to call it daily revenue. Maybe I will call it simply revenue again, just like I called it earlier. I need to use a select statement. When this is done, by the way, if you wish, you can also write it down there. If you wish, it doesn't matter, as revenue. And then I will say from, obviously my table is cafeteria sale again, but it will depend. When you're working with more than one table, then you have to be careful and know from which table you are calling what. And then you will do again each time. Remember, whenever you're doing sum, there is always a group by that comes in. Group by what? We are going to group by, obviously this time, pay method, because you will have one group which will be card, one group which will be cash. That is the first group, the first row, would be card or cash. The second row would be, which means the second group would be card or cash. Then you put your semicolon and you run that, and we'll see what it gives you. So you get now the cash, there was 735 from cash, and you obtain 765 from card. So that helps also to understand whether the cafeteria works more on card payment or on cash payment. So if it's working more and more on card payment, then you have to ensure that such facilities are made available easily to your clients. Then you also may wish to want what are the top three, for example, items that are sold, quantity sold. So let's call it like top three items by quantity sold this time, not by revenue, but quantity sold. So we need, again, a select statement, always like that. We need the item in one column, and we need the, now listen to me, when we talk about item, you have to understand that there are repetitive items. You will see that, for example, there is coffee and you repeat coffee. There's coffee again. There is tea that appears several times. Coffee appears several times. But what you want to do is you want to do the sum of quantities by what? By different items, by coffee, by tea, and so on. So what you want to do is you are going to do the sum of what? Of the quantity. That's what you want. Now it's not as quantity times unit price, but it is rather quantity. And then you say as, give it a name, total quantity, as a column name. And then you will again, from, as usual, cafeteria sales, it's the same data that you are going to get, all this day information, and you will realize that you need to do group by. I'll leave you a few seconds to imagine what you have to write here. Logically, you can pause here and determine what I should write. If I want to know what is the top three items by quantity sold, it means that I will have one column that will be sum of quantity, or the total quantity. On the left, you will have items sold. So the group by should be by, I give you some second to think, it should be by items sold. And then, of course, I will again do the order by. The order by helps me to know which items is sold most. Okay, what is the highest sales in terms of quantity? So obviously, I am talking about total quantity here. I'm not talking about daily revenue, but total quantity. I put the total quantity here, right? But there is something else. I told you that you need the top three items. So if you just run that as it is right now, you will see that you won't get the top three items. You get samosa, coffee, sandwich, tea, juice, and biryani. But if you want the top three items, you need to add an additional statement to that clause, an additional clause to that select statement, which is a limit, and you limit it to three top rows. All right. So there is an order in which you follow. You will see that here samosa, coffee, and sandwich comes first automatically. So that's the kind of things that you can do in SQL. What I want to do next now, I want you to do something as an exercise that you will do, as an exercise that you will be doing, is that number one, let me just copy all this and then I will make it clear here what I want from you. You will need to I'm giving you three small exercise, all right, where number one, you list 10 most expensive individual items. I already gave you what you will have in the columns and the total price. I also asked you to compute the total revenue for each campus and payment method, all right, for each campus and payment method. This is something that I am requesting from you, okay? And I'm also asking you to produce uh, the a small daily KPI where you will have a date, will have the total transactions, will have the total quantity and the total revenue. For example, for the total transactions, I did not discuss that in this lecture. I will let you do an independent study to determine what clause I need to use to be able to find the total transactions. It's relatively easy. There is only one clause, one function rather, that will enable me to do that. So I'll leave it to you to do the exercise and try it on your own. And I will send you the solution anyway later. So that's all for our lecture 3. We've gone through quite a number of things to in this lecture 3 series. We've started by reading, we've been starting about talking about JSON, reading a JSON file, writing a JSON file. We've understood how to read a Parquet and write a Parquet file. We've also understood what a CSV is compared to a Parquet. We've seen their advantages, we've seen their disadvantages. These are the different things that we have been talking about, and we've also talked today about in this lecture video. We are talking about SQL, some basic, very basic statement. Just bear in mind that I've gone through all these different codes, but for some of you who are not familiar with many of these, there are materials online that I gave you. I gave you a list of recommended books that I would highly recommend that you go through to be able to understand better the concepts. All right, so at least you have an idea of what it is, but to better understand it, it is important that you do some independent study on that subject. All right, that's all for today. I see you next week for our interactive session. We are going to meet where of course, for those who have troubles, they will meet. For those who are okay and understanding the materials without any issue, then there is no need for you to meet. I will be meeting only those who have any problems. So those who do not have any problem, they can carry on and it's all fine. Thank you for your attention. So see you soon for our interactive session.